The envelope from Brighton University landed in Emily Reeves's hands like a stone wrapped in hope. She read the first line 4 times before the word regret stuck. And then she was crying hard enough that the ink started to blur. An hour later, the letter sat on Charles Reeves's mahogany desk, its address still sharp.
Granddad, I don't understand. My scores were above their median.
Hand me the page, Emily.
Charles adjusted his glasses, and the crest flared under the lamp. The same Brighton seal he'd seen hammered into bronze 30 years before. His jaw tightened.
She's standing in a shadow she doesn't know exists. Sit down, sweetheart. Tell me exactly what the letter says.
It's generic. We are unable to offer you admission at this time. As if my entire future is just inconvenient. I did everything right.
Charles said nothing. He squeezed her shoulder and looked past her toward the window, where the university's name pulsed in his memory like a forgotten password. The letter sat on his lap, heavy as a verdict he intended to overturn. The next morning, Charles sat in his study with a list of numbers he rarely dialed. The voice on the other end was polite but evasive. No one could speak to the committee's reasoning. There had been a flag, perhaps, but details were confidential.
A flag? They didn't say mistaken. They didn't say resolved. They just said flag.
Emily appeared at his door that evening, still raw but calmer. She walked into his study and dropped a new detail into the conversation like a loose thread.
Granddad, you know Jessica's mom, Mrs. Manning. She's on some admissions volunteer thing. Jessica told me months ago that her mother advises the committee. I didn't think much of it, but now...
Patricia Manning. Yes, I remember. Jessica's mother.
We haven't spoken in months. Something about that family always felt performative.
Charles reached for a notepad and wrote Manning, volunteer board in his careful script. His hand was steady. His mind was not.
A mother on the board, a daughter on the wait list, a falling out no one talks about. That's not coincidence. That's architecture.
He tucked the notepad into his jacket and told Emily to be patient. He didn't tell her that patience was the last thing he intended to offer anyone. Charles knew one man who might still answer, Dean Harrison, a career administrator, who owed him 3 decades of quiet back-channel candor. The next afternoon, Harrison arrived at a secluded bench carrying 2 cups and a face shaped by years of institutional caution.
Dean Harrison, I am not asking for a policy briefing. My granddaughter's file. There was a flag. What kind?
Charles, you understand I shouldn't be discussing internal processes, but there was an integrity complaint, anonymous, filed through the volunteer board.
Integrity. Emily's never had so much as a detention. What exactly did this complaint claim?
The details are sealed, but from what I've seen, the committee took it seriously. Someone wanted her out.
Anonymous complaints from volunteers aren't standard procedure. That's a backdoor, and you know it.
Harrison looked down, stirring his coffee without drinking. The board member had influence, he finally murmured, and the system was designed to protect the board, not the applicants.
So someone weaponized the rules. A volunteer with enough access to flag a file and enough motive to destroy an 18-year-old's future.
He rose, thanked the dean, and walked back toward the main hall. The game was rigged, and the only person who could unrig it had just started walking. That evening, Charles opened his laptop and began to pull threads. Public records, a few calls to people who owed him quiet favors. By midnight, he knew 2 things. Jessica Manning was waitlisted at Brighton. The confidential list wasn't so confidential when you knew who to ask, and he found social media crumbs. Photos of Emily and Jessica laughing at a coffee shop, replaced suddenly by silence 6 months ago. A comment thread where Jessica's mother called Emily overly ambitious.
Waitlisted daughter. A friendship shattered. A mother with a seat on the board who sees my granddaughter as a threat.
He glanced at the shelf beside his desk, where a photograph of his late wife, Eleanor, sat beside a framed thank you letter on university letterhead from 1994. The irony pressed against his ribs.
Enough. I need eyes without my footprints.
The next afternoon, Charles met Marcus in a nondescript office downtown. Marcus was the kind of man who carried silence like a weapon.
Patricia Manning. Brighton University Volunteer Board. I need to know how she accessed an admissions file and what she put in it. No trace.
You understand that internal board records are locked. I'll need something to start with.
Charles slid a thin folder across the table. Inside were admission statistics, the flagged file reference, and a photograph of Patricia Manning at a university reception. He said nothing else, and Marcus didn't smile. That was exactly what Charles needed. 3 days later, Marcus delivered the access logs. Patricia Manning had viewed Emily's file 5 times in the month before the complaint. Each login was time-stamped. Late evenings, weekends. The pattern left no room for coincidence.
Show me the complaint form.
It's unsigned but has a misspelling. Integrity. I checked a board memo Patricia Manning wrote last fall. Same error.
She spelled integrity wrong while accusing my granddaughter of lacking it. Proof, but dirty. Using it would expose his investigation and a connection he'd buried for 3 decades. Marcus, I need a way to force a review without my name on it. Something systemic.
A conflict of interest audit could work. Your donor agreement from '94 gives the foundation that authority.
Then route it through the foundation's legal trust. I'll fund it, but my name doesn't appear. Not yet.
He closed the folder. The evidence was solid, but the delivery system wasn't built yet. Emily's future hung in a balance only he could feel. That evening, Charles laid 2 plates on his dining table and asked Emily to stay. His questions were more carefully chosen than the silverware.
We were best friends since 9th grade. But last winter, Jessica started acting like she had to beat me. Mrs. Manning smiled like a photograph. She told me ambition was fine, as long as you didn't overstep. Then Jessica just froze me out. No explanation. I think her mother made her choose.
Charles listened, his knife resting on the plate. Every detail matched the profile he'd already built in his head.
Did Patricia ever speak to the school about you? Or mention the committee directly?
Jessica said her mom could make things happen at Brighton. I thought she was just being dramatic.
So the threat was real, and my granddaughter was collateral damage for a waitlisted seat.
He reached across the table and covered Emily's hand. The promise to fix this lodged in his throat, never reaching his voice. When Emily finally smiled, tired but trusting, Charles walked to his study. The silence bent his shoulders. 2 days later, Marcus appeared at the downtown office with a manila envelope. He didn't bother with the greeting.
The original complaint. Lifted from an unsecured cabinet. It's thin, but it's everything. But it's everything.
Charles opened it. The form was flimsy, unsigned, but bore the university's confidential stamp, and Patricia Manning's unmistakable looped G.
I have a sample of her handwriting, a note she sent to Emily's counselor.
He placed the note beside the complaint. The loops, the slant, identical. A blind man could see it.
I could walk this into the dean's office tomorrow and end her, but Emily's name would surface again, and mud sticks.
He closed the folder. The revenge he wanted wasn't the revenge his granddaughter needed. He picked up the phone.
Marcus, activate the review through the foundation. No names, just the evidence.
And if the board buries it...
Charles didn't answer. The weight of 1994 settled onto his shoulders like a coat he'd never stopped wearing. The next move was no longer about proof. It was about architecture. The donor reception filled the university hall with polished laughter and the scent of old money. Charles stepped inside in a blazer that cost less than the centerpiece. He drifted toward a marble pillar, unmemorable. Across the polished floor, Patricia Manning turned every conversation into a performance, her voice carried easily across the room. Emily's name reached him before he could see her lips form the word.
The Reeves family. I suppose they thought old connections could buy a seat. The board did what it was supposed to do.
Mrs. Manning, the applicant's dossier was quite strong. Perhaps we should leave the decisions to the committee.
Oh, the committee sees what it needs to see. Some children are just not a good fit for this institution.
Not a good fit, because you carved her out with a forged complaint.
He set his cup down and stepped back into the shadow of the pillar. No one saw him leave. The drive home was silent. In his study, the photograph of Eleanor caught the lamplight. The review was already in motion. The evidence sealed. Watching Patricia laugh had made the whole architecture feel less like strategy and more like justice. The petition landed on the university's legal desk at 9:15 a.m. A conflict of interest review, funded through a blind trust, citing conditions from a 1994 donor agreement. Within hours, the board's counsel pushed back. Confidentiality clauses, volunteer protections. They argued for weeks.
They can delay, but they can't dismiss. The donor clause is iron. I wrote it myself.
Meanwhile, Emily's laptop glowed with acceptance letters from safety schools. She stacked them in a folder labeled Plan B.
Granddad, I got into Carstead. It's a good school. I should just commit and stop dreaming about Brighton.
You are not settling, Emily. Not unless you have to.
It's not settling if it's the only door open. Sometimes you just have to walk through.
Charles watched her compile a future that wasn't hers to build, and the silence in his throat felt like a second rejection.
2 more weeks. The review's evidence is locked in my drawer, and I am feeding her patience. She doesn't know she's eating.
He pulled the key from his pocket, opened the drawer, and placed the complaint beside Eleanor's photograph. The clock ticked louder than any argument. The board's reply arrived on letterhead heavy with institutional weight. Confidentiality, volunteer protections, the delicate nature of admissions. Charles read it twice, then called his lawyer. The donor agreement's enforcement clause, the same iron language he'd insisted on in 1994.
Remind them that refusal triggers a court review. The endowment isn't a gift, it's a contract.
That afternoon, Emily's laptop chimed. A generic update from Brighton. Her file was still active. The committee appreciated her patience.
We remain optimistic about your candidacy. Translation: we're keeping you as a backup.
They're running out the clock, waiting for the deposit deadlines to pass, so she commits elsewhere.
His lawyer confirmed the board had requested a 30-day extension. Charles's thumb hovered over the call button.
Denied. No extension. They comply by Friday, or the motion lands.
He ended the call. Across the room, Eleanor's photograph held the lamplight, her smile unchanged after 30 years. The chessboard was set. The next move would either free Emily or cement the lie. Charles put the phone down. He could wait 1 more week. The review panel convened in a windowless room on Friday. Patricia Manning adjusted her cuffs and smiled as if she'd called the meeting herself. The panel's lead read from a tablet. 5 separate logins to Emily Reeves's file, each timestamp documented. Patricia's smile flickered.
I've accessed dozens of files as part of the board's evaluation process. That's my role.
Then the lead placed a photocopy in front of her. The integrity complaint, unsigned, with integrity misspelled. Beside it, a board memo from Patricia herself, same error.
That could be anyone. Spelling errors prove nothing.
A handwriting expert's comparison was referenced. The loops, the slant, a match. Patricia's chair scraped backward.
This is a personal attack. My family has given too much to this institution to be treated like this.
The panel was silent. Then, without a word, Patricia snatched her bag and strode out, heels cracking like gunshots on the tile. An hour later, Marcus texted Charles, "Panel finds substantial evidence of conflict of interest. Report filed. Board to review next session."
Not a victory. A door cracked open. The board can still bury it.
The draft report landed on Dean Harrison's desk at 7:42 a.m. He read it twice, coffee cooling, then called an emergency board session.
The evidence is clear. I am recommending immediate suspension of Mrs. Manning and a full re-evaluation of Emily Reeves's file.
The board pushed back. Optics, precedent, a murmur about Patricia's connections. But the report was iron. They voted without a name in the room. Charles received a call. Not from Marcus. Dean Harrison's voice was tight. "It's done. She's suspended. The file is reopened."
My name stays out of this, Dean. Not a word. Emily walks back in clean.
Late that afternoon, Emily's phone lit up with a Brighton area code. She stared at it, unmoving, before finally pressing accept.
Hello? A second interview? Yes, I'll be there. Next Tuesday, Granddad, Brighton called. They want to talk again. After all this time, I thought I was dead on their list.
Then you go. You walk in there and remind them who you are. Nothing else matters.
She pulled out her planner and circled Tuesday in black ink. The hope she'd buried weeks ago surfaced, cautious and raw. The review's final report was published on a Tuesday morning, clearing Emily Reeves of any allegation and censuring the volunteer board for unchecked conflicts of interest. Patricia Manning's removal from the board was confirmed the same hour. Emily received the formal apology letter from the university, a single page, watermarked, that ended with, "We deeply regret any distress caused to your family."
Granddad, the university apologized. They said, my file was wrongly flagged. I don't even know how to feel.
An apology is a start, but it's not the same as a seat in the classroom.
He read the apology twice, the paper crisp under his fingers. Then he looked at her, and the weight of everything he'd done rose into his throat.
I could tell her now. The plaque, the trust, the late nights, all of it.
But he looked at the hope barely holding in her eyes, and he knew that if he spoke, her victory would feel borrowed. So he said nothing.
I am going to call Carstead and withdraw my deposit. I'll just wait for Brighton. You believe they'll really give me a fair shot now, don't you?
Charles nodded. The admission was still undecided, but the truth was no longer a weapon. It was a choice that could wait. The morning of the interview, Emily walked into the admissions building with the apology letter folded in her pocket. Not as a shield, but as a receipt.
You don't need to prep me, Granddad. I already did that for 3 years in high school. This one's mine.
She's learned to carry her own weight. That's the whole point, isn't it?
The panel asked about her research, her failures, her resilience. She answered without gloss, letting the gaps show because the triumphs filled them.
I don't have a perfect record. I have a real one, and I am ready to build on it here.
3 committee members traded glances, the kind that meant they were recalibrating.
It felt like they were actually listening, Granddad. Not just checking boxes. I think it went well.
That evening, Charles's phone buzzed with a single sentence from Dean Harrison. The new panel is impressed, but the full committee vote is too close to call. Optics are delicate.
Impressed but scared to act. That's the Brighton I've always known.
He pulled open the desk drawer. Beside Eleanor's photograph, the original complaint still sat, a weight he hadn't lifted. Now he needed a lever. Charles closed the drawer gently, as if sealing a letter. He picked up the phone and dialed the number of a foundation he hadn't touched in years.
Create a scholarship. Full tuition, 4 years. Every admitted student from Emily's district. No income limit. funded by the Eleanor Reeves Trust.
The lawyer paused, pencil still. That's a multi-million-dollar commitment, Mr. Reeves. Are you certain?
Certain. Routed through the trust. My name stays anonymous. This isn't a bribe. It's a level floor.
The following morning, a transfer of funds went through a silent network. By afternoon, the university's communications office had a press release. A spokesperson stood at a podium. Anonymous donor establishes Brighton Opportunity Scholarship, open to all admitted students from the county. No strings attached. Charles watched the bulletin on his laptop, a small, tired smile breaking the surface. It was the most expensive silence he'd ever purchased. Dean Harrison called within the hour. Charles, this scholarship, it's perfectly timed. The committee sees it as a gesture of goodwill. They're ready to move.
My name is not on that scholarship, Dean. This is for the merit of the applicant, not the memory of the donor. Understood?
He hung up. Across the room, Eleanor's photograph caught the last of the daylight. The lever had turned. Now the door would open, or it wouldn't. The 3 days that followed were a lesson in the physics of hope, how it stretches time until every hour feels like alone.
I am checking my email again. This is the 17th time today. I think the inbox is starting to judge me.
He'd sworn he wouldn't call Harrison. But his thumb found the contact twice before he stopped himself.
On the third evening, his phone lit up without ringing. A text, 3 words. Full vote passed.
He didn't reply. He set the phone down and let the silence settle. The victory was complete and entirely invisible.
2 mornings later, Emily's cry reached him before her footsteps. The acceptance letter was in her hand, real at last.
Granddad, I got in. Full acceptance, the merit scholarship. It says Brighton Opportunity Scholarship.
Charles caught her in his arms. She was laughing and crying and trying to read the letter again all at once.
You were right. You told me not to settle, and I didn't. I still can't believe they gave me this chance.
Charles held her tighter and said nothing about the plaque, the review, or the scholarship. The only words he trusted were unspoken. The weeks blurred into packing tape and lists. Emily's room acquired the hollow echo of a place about to be left behind.
Granddad, I am not taking all my books. Just the important ones. And maybe a few more. Okay, all of them.
Charles spent those afternoons in his study, double-checking that every record of the scholarship led to a wall with no windows.
If the trust holds and the foundation stays silent, then my name stays where it belongs, buried.
By 8 o'clock, they were on the road, the campus waiting at the end of a long straight highway.
My first lecture is 9 a.m. in Reeves Hall. Ever heard of it?
Charles's hands tightened on the steering wheel for a fraction of a second, then relaxed.
I've heard of it. It's a good building. Solid.
He parked under the old oak tree near the main hall, branches heavy with the weight of 3 decades. The limestone facade rose quiet ahead, every stone a transaction he'd never revisit. They crossed the quad as the clock tower struck 9:15, Emily's gait quicker than his, her eyes on the great oak doors.
Look at the light through those windows. I am going to take so many notes my hand falls off.
Note-taking won't matter if you don't listen first. Every hall has a story, and this one more than most.
He held the heavy door open for her, and the foyer swallowed them in cool marble and echoes. Just inside, a brass plaque caught the slant of light. Charles's steps slowed for the briefest moment. The engraving read simply, "In memory of Eleanor Reeves, 1994. No context, no footnote, just her name and the year he'd given everything. Emily, already staring down the corridor toward the lecture hall, missed the pause entirely.
Reeves Hall, lecture room, 102. I have to go. Don't want to be late on my first day.
Go. I'll find a seat. You don't need a spectator.
She disappeared through the far doors, and Charles stood alone in the foyer, the plaque warm on his left. Charles pushed through the inner doors and found the lecture theater already filling, the air thick with the scent of paper and new beginnings. He slid into the back row, where the shadows gathered, and let his eyes adjust. 3 rows from the front. Emily had already opened her notebook, pen poised, her profile sharp with concentration.
50 years, Eleanor. And it all led to this room.
The professor began, voice steady as a metronome, and Charles let the sound wash over him. Walls he'd paid for, a girl he'd fought for, a woman who never saw either. His eyes stayed on Emily, but his mind flickered to Eleanor's handwriting on a check, to the crane lifting the cornerstone, to the silence after the applause. The lecture hall filled with the scratch of pens, and he closed his eyes, letting the sound be enough. When he opened them, Emily was raising her hand, the answer already on her lips. He didn't need to hear the words. The sight of her, upright, unbroken, unbought, was the only dividend he'd ever wanted. When the lecture ended, Emily was already packing, and Charles allowed himself one last look before he blended into the departing crowd. As students streamed out, Charles waited beyond the doors, and Emily found him in 3 seconds.
Granddad, that professor is incredible. And the hall, the stained glass, the woodwork. Can you believe this place?
It's a good hall. Solid bones.
It feels important. Like the walls are older than the whole campus.
He didn't answer. He simply walked beside her as she continued, her voice carrying all the weight he would never add. They passed the brass plaque without pause, Emily describing her notes, Charles measuring his steps. The bronze remained, catching the sun from the high windows. The name Eleanor Reeves rested where it had for 3 decades. Charles glanced back once, just once, and then the doors closed behind them. The plaque didn't need him to keep watching. It had its name, and it had a girl who would never read it. The hall held them both, one in memory, one in flesh, and neither would ever need to know. Later that evening, when the campus emptied and the lights dimmed, Charles walked back into Reeves Hall alone. The plaque was still warm from the day's light. He lifted his hand and pressed 2 fingers to Eleanor's name. No words, just the pressure of memory and the faint texture of engraved letters under his thumb. The lecture hall was silent now. Rows of empty seats stretching toward a darkened stage. He sat in the fold-down seat he'd occupied that morning, and the stillness felt like a held breath finally released. This hall had been a promise to Eleanor, a weapon for Emily, and a debt repaid to no one but himself. The brass plaque in the foyer asked for nothing more. It simply reflected the dim light, waiting. When he finally rose, the weight that had pressed on him for months was simply gone. He didn't look back. Everything he'd built was already in the walls, and it would still be there long after the seats filled again. Some legacies are carved in stone, others in the lives they shape. Charles Reeves had given both, and asked for neither. A week later, the campus settled into its rhythm. The ring of a bicycle bell, the rustle of leaves across the quad. Emily sat on the grass with 3 new friends, her laugh carrying on the wind like a debt that had never been owed. From a wooden bench near the library, Charles watched. Not with longing, with the quiet completeness of a man who no longer needs to speak. The plaque caught the midday sun, Eleanor's name glowing soft against bronze. 100 students walked past it every day, never reading it, yet walking through the gift it secured. From the clock tower, the whole campus spread out. Stone and grass and the tiny figure of a girl in a lecture hall. The stone remembered 1994. The girl didn't need to. Charles stood, folded his paper, and walked the long path back to the parking lot. The hall remained as it had for decades. Solid bones, quiet promises, a name no one asked for. Some names are carved in stone. Others are carved in the lives they shape.